Mr. Normal Person. He's completely normal. So Love and Monsters is a comedy monster movie that I had never heard of before its drop on Netflix a couple of days ago. Apparently it was out in October somewhere, but I guess because of COVID and because it doesn't have the highest level of cast here, I guess it just kind of went under the radar. But being both a comedy and a monster movie, I figured it was perfect for this channel. But after watching the trailer, my big question was, is this just a reskin of Zombieland, but with monsters instead of zombies? And even if it is that actually a bad thing? So it stars this guy, Dylan O'Brien, and if he looks familiar, it's because he's the voice of Bumblebee in Bumblebee! So that's where I know him from, yeah! He's also in the Maze Runner movies and the Teen Wolf series, so, not the most amazing of track records there, buddy. But considering this movie's most known actor is probably Michael Rooker, yeah, I mean, that's the territory we're in here. We just got to deal with it. The plot involves an asteroid hurtling towards Earth, and humanity fires a bunch of rockets at it like they always do in these movies. You can't solve every problem by firing a missile at it! Global warming? Nuke the ozone! 0.01% of the population having more wealth than the rest of the world combined? Nuke the fucking poor people! Systematic racism in society? Oh no, God, don't go there. But a bunch of chemicals from the rockets rains back down to Earth and it mutates loads of animals into killer abominations, and 95% of the human race is killed off. And our guy here is living underground in a bunker with a bunch of couples, and he is the only single guy, so it's pretty awkward. And his best friend is a non-functioning robot called Mavis. And unfortunately for him, Mavis isn't one of those love robots from Rick and Morty, you know the ones I mean? Because if it was, trust me, there'd be no movie here because he'd be locked inside his room the whole time. Also, like Zombieland, our guy is a bit of a scaredy cat and is prone to these panic attacks where he freezes and can't move. So the story revolves around him traveling to get back to his girlfriend Amy, who lives in another colony about 80 miles away. They were separated in the early monster attacks and have been staying in touch with each other over the radio, but their call is cut off one day and it prompts Joel to set off to find her.
West. This way. West is this way. Split the difference. Go this way.
So without even a real heading to follow, he sets off into the overgrown wilderness. He comes across a house with a swimming pool where he sees this, which is like a mutant toad thing with a stretchy tongue, and he's helped out by a dog called Boy, and whinges some more about not having seen his girlfriend in 8 years.
I haven't seen her in 7 years.
Like, he is one of those guys who will tell anybody about the one that got away. I mean, it's pretty amazing that she's waited 8 years for the guy, don't you think? Suspicious. Joel and Boy set out on their journey again before Joel falls into a sand gobbler's nest, only to be rescued by these two, who instantly mock him for being useless. And yeah, this guy being useless is turning out to be pretty much the one and only joke in this movie. But how does he respond? He whinges about not having seen his girlfriend for 8 years.
So sweet. She loves me too, so I pick up right where we left off kind of thing.
And these guys are like, you know what, we better teach this guy to man up. So they come across this giant boulder snail. And it seems fairly docile. And these two teach Joel to recognize the difference between an aggressive monster and one that's fairly docile, and then it wanders off. I wonder if that knowledge will come in handy somewhere further down the line. Let's see. But eventually, it's time to go separate ways, and Joel leaves the pair, and Michael Rooker gives Joel a grenade as a parting gift. And it's a really nice moment, with the next scene being really bleak and cold and miserable as they enter a spooky swamp, and of course, it's home to this thing. And Joel is knocked out as the beast goes after the dog, but Joel manages to overcome his freezing panic attacks and uses his newly acquired crossbow skills to save the dog. He finds another droid like his Mavis doll from the bunker, and it's had its legs bitten off, and yep, he tells Mavis all about Amy before Mavis volunteers her power source, and yes, she would rather be dead than listen to any more about Amy, and you know what, I can kind of understand. So she gives him a power source so he can contact Amy, and Amy tells Joel that some survivors have shown up and they're going to be moving the colony. Anyway, the call is cut short again, and yep, Joel takes Mavis's final 15 minutes to talk about Amy. I mean, Mavis has been lying there for years with her legs chewed off, not able to go anywhere, and suddenly this guy starts going on, rabbiting on about Amy. It's amazing that she didn't just go fuck this shit and set a self-destruct sequence and blow her own head off. I mean, do we know that Amy feels the same way back? Or should this movie have been called Soppy One-Way Infatuation and Monsters? I mean, do we even know if Amy is still single at this point? I mean, you'd have thought she'd have mentioned it if otherwise, but it has been 8 years and it just hasn't been mentioned at all, so it's making me extremely suspicious. I think if it was me, I'd want a confirmation before risking my life setting out on a journey like this. Joel kills a queen sand gobbler with a grenade. and then gets covered in leeches, which makes him trip balls, before finally Amy appears and takes him to her cabin in the woods. They go back to her colony, and Joel is instantly made to feel insecure when a more capable and generally more manly Cap in charge, and
I'm not the same person that I used to be, you know?
oh, there you go. The girl didn't wait for him, and of course, she's moved on with her life, and I knew it. Why she didn't say something is absolutely bewildering. I guess she didn't want to break his heart.
Because he's so fragile!
His mushy little moping soppy heart.
Fragile little mushy heart!
This girl has never heard the phrase, "you have to be cruel to be kind," and thought that maybe she could find an easier way to let his floppy, spineless self down and ease him into the friend zone. Or maybe she just thought that playing with his affection was kind of fucking funny. But either way, after risking life and limb, he now realizes that he has been an utter sap. Oh, Joel, my boy, couldn't you have just asked her if she was still single? Anyway, Joel starts to miss his old colony, and he finds out that they've had multiple breaches before the fucking phone cuts out again at the most important moment again. But that's before the new leader of Amy's colony tries to poison everyone. And this girl with a grenade launcher on her arm blows up their radio tower. Basically, what these guys are doing is that they're traveling around stealing food from unsuspecting colonies. They travel around in this wrecked yacht, and it's being towed by this giant crab monster. Then, once they've stolen all the colonists' food, they take the colonists themselves and feed them to the crab. So there's a big fight scene, and Joel sees that this is a kind, gentle crab, kind of like the snail before, remember? And removes the bad guy's electric shock chain that he was using to control the crab. And the crab goes and eats the evil bastard and wrecks the yacht. Death by crab, take that. Then Joel heads back to his original colony and spreads everything he's learned over the course of his adventure over the radio waves to the other colonies before leading his colony up to the mountains, where there is supposed to be fewer monsters, and that's also where Michael Rooker and the little girl went. We see a glimpse of Michael Rooker and the girl up in the mountains, almost waiting for them, and it's a really nice way to end. And honestly, I was really expecting to see these guys show up again, maybe to save the day somewhere earlier on in the movie, but they didn't. They really weren't in it all that much at all, and actually that was a nice surprise, because what they did bring to it was really, really important and all the more meaningful for it. So this movie was quite a pleasant surprise for me. Nothing amazing, don't get me wrong, but just a simple, fun movie that leaves you with a bunch of feel-goods. Was it just a reskinned Zombieland? No, it was part Zombieland, part Hunt for the Wilder People. It also reminded me a little bit of the last Kids on Earth cartoon. It's definitely aimed at a different audience too. Zombieland was definitely one for the adults. This is more for like early teens, or maybe something you'd watch with a whole family. It's probably a bit gory for the really little ones though. The one weakness though, I didn't really find this super funny. I was expecting more from what I saw in the trailer, but it is amusing enough, and the characters were likable enough to carry the whole thing. Even though I did find Joel's pining and moping about the girl he almost but didn't get with a little soppy. Joel on the whole though is a really sympathetic character who learns to man up just enough to survive, but not too much that he loses who he really is. You know what this movie reminded me of? Do you remember Real Steel with Hugh Jackman? Like, that's not a brilliant movie by any stretch, right? But it does have something about it that really strikes a chord with you, and you really end up enjoying it just for what it is. So yeah, so this has a bit of that, whatever that is. You know what I mean? Maybe you don't. Whatever. Listen, I'm going to leave it there. Get out of my head, and I will see you very soon for the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and cheerio, bye!
Get that.